My name's Shanine Page. I am a final year fashion communication student at QUT, and I'm also a freelance writer and researcher.
My name is Ali Hama and I'm 21 years old. I am a university student in my fourth and final year studying marketing and fashion communication, and I'm also the president of the QUT Fashion Society for 2020.
Hi, my name's Brittany Drecon and I'm the founder and editor at Brit's List, an online publication that is dedicated to telling the stories of fashion brands that lead their industry in sustainability and ethical production.
Hi, my name is Samantha and I'm a freelance fashion writer, creative and law student from Brisbane. I'm particularly interested in the relationship that fashion has to capitalism and how it contributes to this unethical system.
COVID-19 has had a huge impact on the global fashion industry. Supply chains are dispersed around the world, and so the industry is definitely impacted. In terms of how it's affected my work and my publication day to day, there was definitely a hit because people stopped spending money. They weren't sure what was going on within their job and their family, so that was totally expected, and a lot of brands that I've spoken to did experience this. However, it picked up really quickly, so I think as soon as there was some kind of consumer confidence, people knew whether they had their jobs or not, they started to spend, and they actually were supporting local businesses more than ever. So we've seen a really positive response and a surprising outcome from COVID-19, and Brit's List has certainly seen an increase in traffic of people searching for sustainable and ethical brands.
For me, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a pretty substantial effect on both my university and work schedule. With the restrictions imposed on outdoor activities, there's no question that online shopping has skyrocketed over the past few months. So by working for an online retailer, my department has been busier than ever. And with increased levels of sanitation and social distancing rules, it's been quite difficult to maintain our same level of productivity. But I'm still so grateful that I have been able to continue working, as I know some haven't been as lucky.
Well, at the beginning, I had 3 jobs, and then I had 0, and now I'm back to 1. So it was a little bit of a roller coaster for a while there. Centrelink assistance is a nightmare, but it's okay getting back on track. Uni's fully online, so that was a big transition as well. I usually do a lot of independent study outside of class time, but I'm usually out of the house at a library or a cafe, so it's been really different to be stuck at home. But I think I'm getting used to it now, and I've sorted out a pretty good routine for myself, so I'm back on track.
Obviously, it's been quite a strange time from a professional perspective. Work has been slower, or at least quite different in the way clients are engaging and the kind of work that they're looking for. There is obviously a push for more social media type content, and there's not been as many shows, which I usually like to get involved with. But I think as I'm still in the fairly early stages of my fashion career, I definitely feel like more than a substantive effect on the work I'm currently doing, the pandemic has really, affected the way I think about what I want to do in the future, the types of projects I want to work on, the kinds of companies I want to work with, because I definitely think the pandemic has exposed a lot of issues within the industry and has really made us start to ask those more difficult questions.
The ideal future of fashion is one that considers the resources that go into producing fashion garments and considers the end of their life. So we really need to start working towards a more circular model where that the resources that we use to produce the garments can be reused or are regenerative, and at the end of their life, garments can be recycled or turned into something else. So the current rate at which we're consuming fashion and discarding of it isn't sustainable, and so we do need to look for these solutions. For me, ideally, we have this incredible circular model that's probably not going to happen overnight. In the meantime, we need to slow down consumption and start thinking about what we can do on an individual level. Buying secondhand is a really fantastic way to reduce your environmental impact of your wardrobe. Keeping your clothes for longer, mending them, and just buying great quality clothes that last.
I mean, I'm pretty ambitious, but I think my ideal future of fashion is a complete restructure of the industry. I think there should be more focus on workers at any level, particularly though garment workers, they're routinely in unsafe conditions, making next to no money, and I'd really like to see a shift there where they're really like their safety is prioritized and they're compensated adequately for the work that they do. I'd also like to see a lot more intellectual property support for independent artists and designers, because the fashion industry is pretty rife with copying and blatant ripping off. And of course there's inspiration, and you know, the whole industry is built on inspiration and reinterpretation, but there's a very fine line between that and just completely copying someone who doesn't have the means to pursue it.
It's no secret, and it's quite clear, that the fashion industry is toxic in so many ways. From the environmental impacts, the humanitarian exploitation, to the waste and far beyond. It's just hard to see a perfect future in fashion anytime soon. But if I were to choose a place to start, we just need to slow down. We cannot continue down the road of fast fashion. We can't keep buying into the 50+ seasons a year. We need to prioritise the earth over the industry. We need to rediscover the value of our possessions, rid the overconsumption and care for quality over quantity. This is only the tip of the iceberg, with exploitation, materials and systemic issues still to be addressed. However, I can only hope for anything but business as usual in the future.
I think for me, the ideal future of fashion is one that is actually about fashion, as opposed to the array of just ulterior motives that have arisen in the industry over time. And I think to do that, to get to that stage, we need to first, on just like an ideological level, separate fashion in its very essence, that is fashion as art, fashion as a sociological phenomena, from fashion the industry, because I think we often conflate those two terms, because fashion is not just fashion the industry. Fashion goes beyond that. It's a cultural phenomenon, it's a sociological phenomenon, it's a way of life. It's something that has been talked about and spoken about in a range of indigenous and native cultures. It comes from a place of true humanity, but over time, mostly due to capitalism and the effects of late-stage capitalism specifically, it's become kind of eroded with a lot of, as I said, ulterior motives. So I definitely think my ideal future of fashion is one where we start returning to where fashion actually came from.
Everything? I guess it's kind of hard because fashion is a really wonderful industry in a lot of ways, and I wouldn't be in it if I didn't believe in it. But I also think that a lot of fashion is built off people who are, you know, too poor or too weak to stand up and, you know, request change. And I think that corporations, designers, you know, anyone in a position of power really has a responsibility to shift the industry to just a more respectful environment in general. And so that's, you know, people over profit, and obviously businesses have to make money, but cutting corners in safety and other measures doesn't work for anyone. And the current trajectory that we're on just isn't sustainable. So I think, yeah, I would like to see a more respectful industry, and I'm hoping that COVID will change that.
COVID-19, despite the horrific tolls taken on human life, presents an opportunity like no other to make change towards a better future. Coming out of this pandemic, I hope people will finally see that this overindulgent life that we have been living has played a part in the disastrous state that the world is in today. I hope that we can re-establish connections with our possessions, and that people will think twice when using their purchasing power. I hope that we can redesign the system and remain adaptable to changes that come our way.
COVID-19 has brought to our attention how difficult it is to rely on dispersed supply chains. So what I hope we get out of this is that it is really great to produce your garments locally and work with locally sourced fabrics and the like. So I think the positive thing that could come out of this is that we really go back to basics with our supply chains. We can produce garments here onshore in Australia. We can work with neighbouring countries, and I hope that that really brings us back to our core and back to basics of manufacturing and keeping everything in one place.
Honestly, I hope that this moment, being the pandemic, but also everything that's come along with it during this time, including, for instance, the Black Lives Matter resurgence and all of the political discourse that's kind of resurfaced due to everything going on in the world, I hope that that entire moment can and will serve as a sort of pit stop, a cultural pit stop, where we can all, I guess, kind of stop and think about the way we've been going for a very long time now, and in fashion, particularly to do with the excessive production, mindless consumption, and a lot of the issues in the global supply chain that have really come to light during the pandemic. For example, I know there's been a lot of information spread about the Bangladeshi workers who, despite the ongoing pandemic, were forced to return to work in awful conditions, at risk of the virus, just because of the way the global supply chain works in fashion. So I hope that this moment will allow all of us to stop, people as consumers, but also industry people, and use this time as a portal into a better version of the world and particularly of the fashion industry. There's never been a better chance for us to reevaluate the really big issues. There's never been such a time where everything is changing so much that revolution really seems possible.
I would love to say that COVID-19 is the wake-up call that the fashion industry needed. It certainly brought our attention to some of the huge flaws that are in supply chains, as well as the people who are making our garments and the lack of security that they have. However, fast fashion isn't going away anytime soon, and I'm sure that as soon as we can go shopping again, there will be clothes pumping out that to meet the demand, as they always do. It is a bit of a wake-up call, and I think more personally than for brands. We're at home, we're really thinking about what we need, we're considering what we're spending our money on a lot more, we're thinking about supporting local brands. I think all of these are positives, and in that sense, then it's a great wake-up call.
I hope so. I can sound really bleak about the industry, but I'm hopeful that there will be a really productive change. And we can see stuff happening now. My focus is sustainability, and so I've been really thankful to kind of be in a bit of a bubble where I get to see really amazing things happening in the space of sustainability. But I think the rest of the industry definitely has a long way to go. And usually it's people in a not so privileged position in the industry that are making these changes because they have nothing to lose. And I think once everyone else starts, cottoning on, it will get a lot better for everyone.
Absolutely. I think that this is definitely a wake-up call that we needed, and I hope that it is treated as such and not just ignored in an attempt to go back to normalcy, because after all, this moment has kind of created the background necessary for us to finally make some really huge systematic changes, as opposed to the kind of very small reform type changes that sustainable and ethical movements and political movements have been having over the past few years. This moment in and of itself is a revolution, and I think that people have finally had enough and are angry and are waking up to the things that a lot of niche political circles have been talking about for a long time. I think a lot of radical theory has come into more mainstream discourse, and I really hope that means we will see really big changes in the years to come.
I believe that living in lockdown has allowed us to stew on and think about the world we live in. If a global pandemic doesn't wake up society to the issues right in front of our eyes, I don't know what will, and we need this more than ever.